Now, I personally love doing this, but I do need to share the love. So I am going to pass the mic to someone else from here at SlashData. Welcome, Natasha, who will be your host for the next part of the summit. Thank you, Natasha. On to you.
Thank you, Muskula. Hello. Well, that's a very strong start of the day with such a great panel and presentations. Now we will continue with SlashData's presentation on how generative AI will shape developers' future. And we will find out what our most recent research among developers shows. As they say, it's always best to hear it from the horse's mouth. So please welcome our Senior Market Research Analyst, Brayton Noll.
Hi, everybody. I'm the horse's mouth, or sometimes referred to as Brayton, Senior Market Research Analyst here at SlashData. And today I'm going to be talking about how generative AI will shape developers' future. As I'm sure many of you are aware, and as we've already heard today in some of the previous presentations, interest in AI over the past year has grown considerably. And it's had a reciprocal relationship with a number of new technologies, products, and startups that have come out. This interest has been both fostered by these new technologies or companies that have emerged. And then, of course, these new technologies and products have emerged as well because of the growing interest. But at least for us here at SlashData, and I presume the same is for many of you, our main interest is how are developers seeing AI, and in particular, how are developers viewing the future of their professional lives and viewing how generative AI will affect them in the future. And so to study this, at SlashData, we run a large global developer survey every 6 months. And over the last year, we've run 2 of these surveys, both of which reached more than 17,000 developers across the globe. And on these surveys, we of course track things like generative AI use, but we actually try and touch on a broad spectrum of things that cover the entire gambit of developers' professional lives and things that they use in their workflow. And so today I'm going to be mainly focusing on the data we collected from our most recent survey in Q3 of 2023. So I'll be giving you all some nice data that's fresh and hot. And so in this most recent survey, we asked developers a series of questions to better understand how they're perceiving the future of generative AI in their professional environment. We asked developers what their perception was on generative AI in terms of it influencing their potential and productivity. And we see that overwhelmingly developers are agreeing or strongly agreeing that generative AI will increase their potential and productivity. We asked them if generative AI will allow them to use programming tools that they previously could not. And again, we still see a large majority, although slightly less so, of developers agreeing or strongly agreeing that programming tools will be potentially unlocked in the future with generative AI. Wanting to get a perspective on the whole, we asked developers if generative AI's net impact on the world would be positive. And we see that roughly 2/3 of developers agree or strongly agree that this will be the case. Due to many of the articles in the news about some of the ethical concerns that potentially accompany generative AI, we wanted to get developers' take on this. So we asked them if generative AI raises ethical concerns or will so in the future. And 63% of developers agree or strongly agree that it has the potential to do so. And finally, we asked developers if generative AI will surpass their skills and render their jobs obsolete. This is another common sentiment that we see frequently in the news, that developers or even people outside the fields of technology are worried about AI potentially taking their jobs. And in this particular question that we posed to developers, we see the most heterogeneity. So we see the most disagreement among developers. We see roughly 1/3 agreeing or strongly disagreeing that AI could render their jobs or skills obsolete, but we see more than 42% of developers disagreeing or strongly disagreeing as well. And so for the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to delve into several of these different questions in a little bit more detail to give you all a bit more insight into what's causing some of the disagreement or what's causing developers to think one way or another. And because we see the most disagreement or heterogeneity here at this bottom one, I'm going to go ahead and start with that question. So as I mentioned, on our surveys, we asked developers about a range of topics. Of course, generative AI is one of them, but another topic that we try and trace in our developer community is software productivity metrics. In this case, I'm going to be presenting on the DORA performance metric, which those of you who have worked in or with DevOps professionals in the past might be familiar with this. But basically what this metric is it's a metric for measuring software delivery performance. And it breaks down software delivery performance or quantifies software delivery performance using 4 key factors. And those are time for code changes. So how long a developer and their team takes to change a code, or change production code should they need to. How frequently are developers or their teams deploying code to production, deployment frequency. The time to restore service. So if developers need or their teams need to restore service to an app that had an unplanned outage or went down unexpectedly, how long does that generally take the team? And finally, the change rate failure, which is the percentage of deployments that cause a failure in the production. And so in our survey, we measure all these factors to create a conglomerate or unified DORA performance metric. And then for ease of presentation here today, what I've done is broken down this metric into 3 different categories: high, medium, and low performers. And so the high performers are really your creme de la creme, your the most productive developers. You have then the medium, which is where the bulk of developers and their teams fall. And then on the lower end, you have the lesser productive or slower developers working for teams that take more time to do these things. And excuse me, when we segment this question, generative AI will surpass my skills and render my job obsolete. When we look at it by the different by where the developers fall within these performance metrics, we see some really interesting differences between the high, medium, and low performers. The high performers are much less likely to agree, or strongly agree. Just over 10% of them believe that AI will surpass their skills and render their job obsolete. Meanwhile, you see that more than 50% of the low performers are much more insecure about their future, much less certain about their skills in the new world of AI, and are much more likely to strongly agree that AI is potentially going to replace them. And you see the same pattern and an even larger difference actually on the strongly disagree or agree, where you have more than 70% of these high-performing developers strongly disagreeing or disagreeing that their future or their skills or their job will be replaced by generative AI. And so the takeaway here is that higher performance developers are much less likely to be worried about their skills being replaced by AI. And to continue to examine what are some of the other differences between higher performance developers and maybe more middle of the road or these lower performance developers, we look at another question using these same DORA metrics. And in this instance, we're looking at, will generative AI allow me to use tools that I previously could not? And again, we see differences across the high, medium, and low performance categories. High performance developers or developers working for those most efficient teams are much less likely to agree or strongly agree that generative AI will give them access to new tools. Meanwhile, lower performance are much more hopeful or optimistic that generative AI will unlock some of these new tools that they previously could not use. And so many of you might be thinking, well, these higher performance developers likely work for more experienced teams or have more experience themselves. And this is exactly what we were thinking as well. And we also looked at how the number of years of experience that a developer has affects their perception on whether or not AI will grant them access to new tools that they previously could not use. And we see a consistent pattern here as well that aligns with the high performance category. The more years of experience that a developer has, the less likely they are, by 20 percentage points actually, when you look at from 1 year to 16 plus years, they're 20 percentage points less likely to strongly agree that generative AI will give them access to new programming tools. And so our key takeaway here is that more experience and high performance developers are more cautious about projecting the future of AI is a magical key to open previously locked doors. And they are more confident in their skills and more confident in their position in the tech industry as well. And so I have time to examine one more question. And I thought we'd zoom out and take the question of whether or not generative AI's net impact on the world will be positive. And we can see up here that 2/3 of all the developers we've surveyed, or 67%, believe that either agree or strongly agree that indeed generative AI's net impact on the world will be positive. However, when we segment developers by the different regions in which they're coming from, we start to notice some pretty substantial differences across the different regions. And I'm not presenting regions up here to delve into the cultural or geopolitical reasons why these regions could differ, but I just wanted to make a note for all of us to keep in mind that as we work with developers and study developers or trying to understand developers in this growing and emerging field that is generative AI, not everybody has the same viewpoint or even the same endpoint in mind. And so because our job here at SlashData is to study and understand developers and give voice to developers, and many of you who are working in developer relations or developer outreach, it's important to keep in mind and ask yourself, who are your developers and where are they coming from? And I don't just mean physically, for example, in like global regions, but also what's the context in which they're coming from? And it really highlights for me here the importance of when we're reaching out to developers to consider who we're trying to reach out to. And so if your goal is a global sample, both either in terms of region or in terms of technology usage, it's important to make sure that you're not just reaching out to either one continent, for example, North America, or one group of technology users to make decisions about your entire developer community. And so that's all I have time for today. I want to thank you all very much for your attention and highlight the fact that this was just a snapshot of the AI data that we collected on our most recent survey. So if you have more questions or would like have any follow-up questions on anything I presented here today, I would love to continue the conversation. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you, Brayton. And that was just scratching the surface of our data and insights on generative AI. Please feel free to reach out if you wish to find out more about this topic, as there's a lot that we can offer you both on syndicated research or custom research services. We will now take a short comfort break, and we will be back in exactly 13 minutes. See you soon.